positive. Okay. We also want our learning to be a schus for all the sick people who need a refuah. Amongst them, I think what's your father's name? Shimon, go on.
Shimon ben Chasia.
Shimon ben Chasia and Yisrael Moshe ben Yedgittel, right? And Shimon, Yehuda ben Rivka, and Yaakov Shmuel ben Chana, and everybody else who needs a refuah, Shalom Shlomo. Tomer Rabbanim. Oval, so we're 4 lines from the bottom on Daf Chaf Aleph on the base. Tomer Rabbanim. Oval Gimel Yom Harishonim. The first 3 days. Bami Makom Karev. If someone comes and joins, one of the family comes and joins from a close place, Moina Imam. He's able to join the family within the first 3 days. He doesn't have to start counting Shiva from when he arrives. Rather, he counts with them from when they started. And Tosha says a Makom Karev is Yud Parsois. Yud Parsois was the distance that it would typically take 1 full day to travel. And there's a shaila in the Poskim, is it still Yud Parsois or is it a day of travel? Because if it's a day of travel, there is no place in the world nowadays where you cannot get to within a day. So could be every place would be considered a Makom Karev nowadays. But what if someone came from a far place? Then this person, even if he arrived during the first 3 days, this oval has to start Shiva from scratch. However, once the 3rd day passes, once someone comes too late to join his family from the beginning, then even if someone comes from a Makom Karev, he has to start Shiva all over again. Reb Shimon says, I have one thing that's bothering me. I don't have an answer to it. Why do you have to be there to start Shiva? Why can't you start Shiva wherever you are and then you come and join? What does it mean you start Shiva when you arrive? I didn't chap that. Why can't you be a Bavel while you're traveling? He didn't know about it, maybe he didn't know about it. Right? I understand, but why can't he be annoyed in Hilchos Avelis while he's traveling? The Rice Kriya, he could fear with all the halachas.
Just
so why does he have to be in a certain location?
In the time of the Gemara, I don't quite understand how this would work. If you're 3 days away from where they're sitting Shiva, somebody has to come and deliver you the news that the person was nifter.
No, what's that? What do you mean?
Right. Okay, it's a little different today. But back in those days, if you're 3 days away, it would have taken 3 days for somebody to come and bring you the news. And then it's going to take you 3 days to get back. You're only going to get there for the last day.
What you're saying could be we could understand the Gemara is that you don't find out about it until a little bit later. And that's what it means you arrived later. But you didn't know about it. Yeah, so that's how I understood it when I was learning it yesterday.
Maybe sitting Shiva could mean sitting in one spot and being Noig Avelis there.
People travel during Shiva. There's no problem with traveling. Sometimes people go from one place to another during Shiva. I don't know if that's a steer to Shiva. But that's how I understood it like a big did. I didn't want to say that on my own. But that's how I understood it. If someone's far away, so he'll hear about it later. Oh, it says in the actual what note? It says in 21. It says nothing. It says note 21. But that's what it means. He didn't hear about it. But Avad, if he heard about it, the whole thing's not again. Because then he's going to be a bail with his family. Okay, does he say it over from somebody, or he says it partially? That's right. Well, what else is right? Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you, Victor. There's up to Gemara weiter. We can't veilach, but once someone's passed the first 2 days, good morning, doctor. Afilu bami makom karev. Even if someone comes from a close place, moina la'atzma, he will have to start shiva over from when he finds out. Shimon says.
Just a thought in terms of the 3 days, right? Because he'll have 1 day of shiva with them. Right, and then he'll conclude the shiva. If it's 3 days, if he's 3 days away, it takes 3 days to get the news. It takes 3 days for him to come. Then he'll conclude shiva 1 day with him.
No, our Gemara is saying he actually got there by the 3rd day.
He got there by the first day.
By the 3rd day,
and
the Makom Karev is 1 day traveling, so he even has an extra day because they could have sent a messenger right when the person was nifter, and then he could have come back. That would have been 2 days. We even give him 1 day to arrange travel plans. Reb Shimon says, right, because 10 parsois is what the person could normally travel in 1 day. That's what Tosha says is the definition of Makom Korav. Shimon Aimer, I feel Babi on Shvi, even if the person only showed up on the last day, Makom Korav, but it's a Makom Korav, Moina Iman, all he will have to do is count one day of Shiva. The question that they ask is being that that's his first day of Shiva, does he wear tefillin that day? If you only don't wear tefillin the first day. So the Maram says Avada he has to wear tefillin, because if he doesn't wear tefillin, then that's his first day. The whole idea is he's trying to join in with them. If he has to join in with them, then the day that he has to keep has to be day 7. Well, today most poskim hold there is no such thing as Makom Rachok, because it's one day traveling, you can go anywhere in the world. Yeah,
That certainly hasn't been the case in the last 2 years.
right. Well, that's how some poskim learn. There are some who learn it's still a distance. It's still talking 10 parseis, which would mean if you live in Hamilton, it's Makom Rachok, right? So it's telling the Shiloh. This is what we have our Rabban Pascal does. Omar Mar. So let's drill down a little bit. Gimel Yom HaRishonim, Babi Makom Korav Moini Ma. Amar Pchi Ba'aba Maverechanan, Hu Sheyesh Gadol Habayis Bebayis. And Rashi tells us that what that means is there has to be the Gadol Habayis, the main person of the family, is sitting Shiva in the main area. So then someone who's not the Gadol Habayis, who joins, he will be bottled. He could be mitzaref to the family sitting, and therefore, even on the last day or the third day, or whatever the halacha is, he could join in with the family. Shaila is, what is Gadol Habayis? So a father sitting Shiva with the family for sure is a Gadol Habayis. There's a Shaila if a mother is considered Gadol Habayis, but an older brother is for sure not considered a Gadol Habayis unless he's supporting the family. If he's supporting the family, then even an Acha Gadol will be Gadol Habayis. Iboilu Frektigman. Halach Gadol Habayis Lebeis HaKfaros. What happens if the Gadol Habayis went to the Beis HaKfaros? Now, what is the halacha? This is a little bit of a shaila, what this means. So let's see what Rashi says, the Pashim Shad. Halach Gadol Habayis Lebeis HaKfaros, Acher Mitasei Lekofer. The Gadol Habayis went, he left because he was going to bury somebody. In those days, they would schlep the mace from Babel to Yisrael. He could go a significant amount of time away. V'shah Sham Gimel Yom, and he spent 3 days there. Ma what's the halacha? So Rashi, Micha Shvin and Lei, command the Hava B'Veisei. Do we consider it like he's in the house? Hoil L'Tzarech HaMeis Halachitai. He only went with the mace, L'Tzarech the mace. So therefore, it should be considered like he's still with the family, or not, or since he traveled, he has to start over. Omer Rabbi Yochanan, Afilu Halach Gadol Habayis Lebeis HaKfaros. Even if the Gadol Habayis went to the Beis HaKfaros, Moina Iman. Rashi's Moina Iman means Moina Iman the Avelo Shalahem Heschila Mishachazru Paneim Nameis. Since they did not go along on the trip to take the mace to where it's going to be buried, they turned back. That's when their Avelo starts. The Avelo Shal Gadol, and the Avelos of the Gadol Lo Yisro Acha Yistem HaGadol wouldn't have started normally until they close up the caver. So therefore, the halach is it will be Moina Iman. He must be, because if they didn't, someone else would have to. So that's what the Gemara says over here. So in fact, it could. But there's a lot of interesting approaches to how we learn this. Okay. Which means he doesn't start late, which means he'll be able to start right now as well. Yeah. Moina Iman, Vatanya Moina La'atzman. We learned he has to start when he gets back, or when it's used to him. If he came within 3 days, he's Moina Iman. When he's not Moina, if he didn't return within 3 days. So this is where it gets a little bit sticky, because the Gadol Shababayis, normally the Gadol Shababayis, the only time your Moina Imahen, if an Oval comes late, is if the Gadol Habayis is sitting Shiva. Here it's the Gadol Habayis went away, And Rashi says quite clearly at the bottom of Chav Aleph Amud Beis that Aval and Hoya Godol B'derech Ubabasach Shloisha Yamim Afilu Mimakam Karev Moinu La'atzmoi. So Rashi says very clearly that the Godol Habayis who left, no matter what, he's Moinu La'atzmoi. So here it says it depends if he came back within 3 or not within 3, which is contradictory at first glance to what Rashi says on Amud Beis. So you have to learn Pshat and Rashi is if he Stamazoi was b'mokim Korav, he was away for 3 days, yeah, then maybe he's not Mitzaref anymore and he has to be Moinel Atzmai. But here, since he's going on behalf of the mace, like Dr. Goldar mentioned, so that sort of connects him. The fact that he's going to Tzarech mace might actually connect him more to the family, and therefore, if he got back within 3 days, he's still Moinel Imoin. Tosfos has a completely different approach to this Shaila, but this is how Rashi looks.
Yosy,
Yes.
we're talking about a case where the Gadol Shabbos went to bury the mace, right?
Yes.
So how can they have, I don't understand the whole thing of, here it's talking about 3 days, not 3 days. Of course it's not 3 days. They can't start sitting Shiva until the mace is buried anyway. No? So he took 3 days to come back.
Rashi says, if you look at Rashi, the third line in Rashi, where it says Moinim one, the Avelo Shalahem, the family who's not going to bury the mace, his chila, it starts from Shechazru Pneim in the mace. People who aren't going to bury the mace, their shiva starts the moment they're turning back, and they're no longer carrying the mace. They've given it over to somebody else. So, like when the people send the mace to Eretz Yisrael, the shiva starts as soon as they see the mace off. But the person that's going with the mace to Eretz Yisrael, his shiva starts when they actually do the burial. That's times you have sometimes where remember some children go to Eretz Yisrael with the mace, some don't, and that will impact when the shiva starts. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so that's what I think that's Pshat. Go on according to Rashi. Like Rav said to the people of Salfani, Rashi touches Salfani as a place, so the people who live in Salfani. If they get back within 3 days, they could join in your shiva according to your schedule. Once the mace is buried, he starts his shiva right down. Who's he? That's correct, but we want him to be able to have started sooner. Right. So you're saying it's not that he starts coming in. Right. Yistem Magoil will trigger his shiva. Indeed, yeah. Amalu Rav of name Mechuza. Aton, you fellows, the loyas lisu basar arsa. You don't go with the mess all the way to Yisrael. You just stop in Bavel and then you send it off with whoever's taking the mace to Eretz Yisrael. When you turn back, Rashi says, Mishar hachitza and shalair umigrasha. So whenever it is that you turn back and you leave the people taking the Oren, aschilumanu, that's your time when you would start Shiva. That's how he passed. For me, that's I think how we passed. So there's different shilas because there's different things that could occur. For instance, what happens if someone is not going to be coming in not for the Levi, not for the Shiva? When does his Avela start? Does his Avela start immediately when he hears that the mace was nifter? Or does his Avela start when the family's Avela start, which when the body is buried? So most poskim hold that his Avela start by the same time the rest of the family is when it's used to Hagoyel, or when the mess is sent off. But just because he's not there, it doesn't mean he automatically starts counting Shiva from the moment he hears that his Karev was nifter. So those are the halachas over there. Zok to Gemara Vaytim. Shimon Aimer. Afilu ba b'yom hashvi mimakom Karev. Shimon is mekel. Even if one family member only shows up on the 7th day, but he's mimakom Karev, Mayna Imayan, he will only have to do the last day of Shiva with them. Amar Rabbi Gamda, Amar Rabbi Yosy ben Shaul, Amar Rabbi, Hu Shabo, Matzah Menachem and Atzloi. If he came and he arrived and his family was already taking a walk around the block because they already got up from Shiva, it's too late. He has to get there for Shachris, where there's still people that are being Menachem him. But once their shiva is over. Rashi Shabbat b'shvi shachris at shaloi omdu menachamen eitzel zeshem abayis, when people are still there. But if they're taking a walk, if they got up already, then it's too late and they'll have to sit shiva by himself. Boy Ravana, what happens if a nina rulam? They're getting ready, they're packing up, they're getting ready to stand up, but they didn't actually stand up yet. So that means is, sometimes people who don't have seichel are sitting and being menachem oval, and you clearly see that the oval wants to get up, wants to go, but he has to be polite and entertain his guests. But they're like fidgety. So what happens if you see that they're fidgety already, they want it to be over, but the last minute people are coming out of menachem oval and sitting on his head? Is that considered the shiva is over, or is that considered not? So basically, it's like at the end of the day when the vendor closes his store and there are still customers in the store, so he'll lock the door and write closed, but the customers that are in the store, he doesn't throw out yet. Although they announced on the microphone that we are now closed, please get over to the cash registers, right? But if they actually threw you out, so then for sure it's over. So here you could see they want to close up, but they haven't closed yet. Is that considered close enough? Zok more take it. Zok more about it. Gemiri Chavraya, the Rav Abba Barchia, Rav Abba. The friends of Rav Abba Barchia learned from Rav Abba. Who are these friends? Umanu Rav Zera. Ba'amillah, there are those who quoted it exactly the opposite. Chavri Rav Zera learned from Rav Zera. Umani Rav Abba Bered Rav Chia Bar Abba. So Rabbi Yochanan, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. The halacha of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel in the halacha that he stated in Hilchos Treifus, which we'll get to in a minute. The halacha of Rabbi Shimon ba'Evel, and the halacha of Rabbi Shimon ba'Evel, which means if the person comes Malcolm Korah within 7 days, he could finish the shiva with his family. Rabbi Shimon ba'Evel hadamar. We know that's we were just discussing it. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel b'Treifus is as follows: that none. B'nei ma'ayim shenikfu. One of the simone treifa in an animal is if the intestines are punctured through and through, so now they're leaking. That's a simon of treifa. We're not allowed to eat an animal that has such a problem. But what happens if the intestines were punctured, but the leicha seismosum, but there's mucus within the kishka that oozes out and that plugs it, similar to a radiator stop leak type of chemical. The Moshe built that into the intestines of an animal. So the loch is kshera. That animal is not considered a treifa. My lecha, what exactly is this mucus? Amrav Kahana, shirka demaya the nofik agavduch. If you remember, nowadays the kishka that we eat are just a piece of plastic with dough inside it. But in the good old days, when Mrs. Jacobs used to serve real kishka, the real geschmack of kishka, so if you push your fork down on the kishka and you see that gach oozing out, that's what we're talking about. That's the shirka demaya the nafik agavducha. Just in case you get grossed out by it, think how delicious it tastes. Think how gewaltig it is. Now, don't try drinking the radiator stoply chemical. That probably will not taste as good as the kishka that we remember. Amar Zok the Gemara. Man Amar Mandahu. Somebody said, who is this Mandahu? Adam Echad Mandahava. We don't know who he was. So someone said, can you imagine if you're that guy? I got into the Gemara, you couldn't say my name. But someone said, Iski, I should be Zoicha. The Asik, I should be able to go up there to Shroll. The Agimar Lashmaitza Mipumadamari. So that I should be able to hear the words exactly from whoever said it. So it was either Abzeir or it was Abba Ber Abchia. I want to hear from the source this psak halacha that halacha Rab Shimon and halacha Rab Shimon ben Gamliel the treifus. Kukisolik. Eventually he was soiche. He won a pair of tickets to Israel. And Ashkechei the Rab Abba Ber Abchia Bar Abba. You know how they have on the Ur auction they have a meeting with a gadol, right? Audience with a gadol. So he bought that ticket and he said, "I want to meet with Rab Abba Ber Abchia because I want to be able to ask him this question. I'm not just looking for a bracha v'atzlacha. I actually want to ask him this particular question. That's what I want." And he won the Ur auction. Omer lei, Omer mar, halacha Rab Shimon Gamliel. Betrefus, did you say that? Omer lei, ano ein halacha amri. I didn't say that Allah is like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Treifus. I said Allah is not like him a Treifus. And in fact, this would be a Treifa. You see how important it is to hear it directly from the person who said it, because it was exactly the opposite of what he heard reported. How about Rabbi Shimon Be'evel? What about Rabbi Shimon Be'evel? What do you hold about that? Amalei Pluktin, that's a machlokes. The Itmar Rab Chisda Amar Halacha, the halacha of Rabbi Shimon, that even on the seventh day, someone who joins will just keep that last day of Shiva. V'chein Rabbi Yochanan halacha, but Rabbi Nachman Amar ein halacha. Zok to Gemara, ve'ein halacha to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel b'treifus, v'halacha to Rabbi Shimon Be'evel. The Gemara fears us, we don't pass like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel by treifus, so even if we have this stop leak that sealed the intestines, it's still going to be treifa. But we pass like Shimon Be'evel, the Amar Shmuel, Allah K'diver Mekel Be'evel. Going back to the same rule that we always have, that no matter what, we always pass K'diver Mekel Be'evel, and the halacha is that even someone who joins B'mechem Korav on the seventh day will just finish the Shiva with his family. Akol HaMesim Kulam, Matcha Mitasoi, Hareza Meshubach. All other Mesim, if you're Matcha Mitasoi, which Rashi teaches Mahar Loitziyoi, take the mace as quickly as possible to do the levaya. That is meshubach. That's the appropriate way to do it. But al ovav al imoy, if someone is burying his parents, it doesn't look nice if one is rushing to bury the mace because it looks like they're too eager to open up the will, and that's not a nice thing, huh? Right? Double overtime. So you have to rush. Uh-huh. but that was just a joke. Harezim Meguna is the Meforshim tell us is because when parents are nifter, there's two differences than anybody else. First of all, we want to show an extra cover to our parents, so we want to show that it's difficult to part ways with them. But more than that is not only are we burying our parents, we're also burying our last opportunity to do the mitzvah of kibbut avayim. So therefore, you shouldn't rush to do it. You should show that you're relishing in the mitzvah and your final opportunity to do kibbut avayim. That's why it's magud. And then you can open the room. Haya Erev Shabbos, Erev Yom Tov. If it was Erev Shabbos or Erev Yom Tov, where if you delay burying your parents, it could lead to Chil Shabbos, or as Shmuel said, if it's getting close to 4 o'clock and you're looking at double overtime, so then the box sticks in a third condition. If it was pouring raining, which is not covered for the mace, then then of course you should rush it up. Clearly, the reason why one is rushing is the covered of avim. On all mesim, if you want, you could reduce your work. Rashish could go in schayra, or rotza ein turning over to chavbeis and beis. Ein you can continue doing your regular work. But al ovid al imay memay. What? Frekt moti abom b'dekakashe. We know that an oval is also b'malacha. So what does this mean? Memay basic. It's optional. So I heard 3 pshat. Maybe we'll see how many I remembered. I know I heard 3. Let's see how many I remembered. One shot that I heard was asek and malacha are 2 different things. Asek means business. You're allowed to have a business running. You're just not allowed to do malacha. So that was one shot. So like you're allowed to buy stocks, but you're not allowed to fix a furnace. So that's one shot. The other shot that I heard is that this is not even referring to during the shiva. This is referring for a whole year. There's an Indian to be memayit in asek in business for a whole year after one loses a parent. But after one loses a different one of the 7 krivim, there right after the shiva, you can go back to regular business. So if I remember 2 of the 3 terutzim, and let me think if I can remember the third pshat. It was a third pshat as to what this is referring to. Davar ovid. Yeah, the third pshat is referring to a davar ovid. By everybody else, if it's a davar ovid, someone should do the malacha during shiva. However, for a parent, it's better to forego even in a davar ovid during shiva. Right, but that's also a shaila what that means, because we learned before that if you have a partner in a store and it's very visible, there's a shaila even for the partner, so you're not allowed to keep your store going either. So what schayr is not necessarily opening up a store. It might be a business that you're investing in that's not something that you're actively involved in running. whole year. That's where we have to make it. Very good. So Dr. Gold is saying the mice, everyone's makbid on being the mite in business for the whole year. At first, who does that? Everybody does it. Because the fact that you have to be at minyan 3 times a day, you're for sure cutting away from your business hours. So everybody's for sure makbid on it. Very good. Very good. I like that. So the Gemara, kulam on all the mason, if you want, you could be chaylet, which Rashi says you actually uncover your shoulder. But you have to be chaylet. We don't do that nowadays. We don't expose our shoulder. And the poskim say there's a couple of reasons why. One reason is because being that we don't wear those type of clothing nowadays, it would be foolish looking, and the goyim would laugh at us or think we're being menachish. So that's why we don't do it. But what you see clearly is a lot of these, because you're embarrassed, you shouldn't do a mitzvah. So you see that these are not necessarily written hard in stone that you have to be chayil. So it was a minhag, but I was like a fear, but it's not like you have to, otherwise you'd include. And you see this illustrated clearly in this next story. There was a mice with a gadol echad, shemeis ovet, his father died, uvikesh lachloch, and he wanted to uncover his shoulder because you're supposed to do that for a parent. Uvikesh gadol achar shimoy, there was a big gadol standing beside him by the levaya, and he says, listen, if you're going to be chayil to your shoulder to show solidarity, I'm going to do the same. Uvikesh gadol achar shimoy lachloch, and because of that, so then the gadol says, no, I don't want you to do that. If you're going to do that, then forget it. I won't do it. So the question is, can you just decide I'm not going to do a mitzvah that I'm chayav to do? So you see from here that this Indian to be chayav to the shoulder clearly wasn't something that was mandatory. It was a minhag, it was optional, and therefore, as Gadol Dor said, if you're going to do it in solidarity with me, out of respect for you, I'm not going to do it because I don't want you to do it. Amar Abaye. So who are these two Gedolei Hador that we're talking about? Amar Abaye. Gadol Hador was Rebbe. Rebbe was the Gadol Hador who wanted to be chaylitz, and Gadol Hador Shimoy was Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha. Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha told him, if you're going to uncover your shoulder, I'm going to do it as well. So Rebbe backed off. The Ikadamri, it's the opposite. Gadol Hador was Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha, and the Gadol Hador Shimoy was Rebbe. Zok to Gemara, let's analyze this, which way it must be. Bishlam the Mandamar Gadol Hador Shimoy was Rebbe. Bishlama, if Rebbe was the Gadol Hador Shimoy, but the Oval was Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha, it makes sense why Rabbi Yaakov said, I'm not going to do chalitza, I'm not going to uncover my shoulder because I don't want Rebbe to do that. But if the Oval was Rebbe and Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha was the Gadol who was going to show solidarity, who was Rebbe's father? If Rebbe was by the levaya of his father, who was Rebbe's father? Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Nosiyava. If Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel was the nifter, well then v'chula alma mechayv l'michlis. So why would he say that I'm not going to do it because I don't want you to do it? Rabbi Yaakov himself would have been mechuyev, even though Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel was not his father, but Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel was the nasi, and that would have been mechayev Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha anyway, independently, to be chayilus his shoulder. So therefore, the story doesn't make sense. Dr. Markasha, no, we'll have to figure that out. But I'll call upon him. What we see from here is for a nasi, everybody's mechuyev to be choylitz, and you see that in honor of another gadol, he refrained from doing choylitz. For all other mesim, after 30 days, one could take a haircut. But for a parent, so even after the shloishim, one may not take a haircut until someone tells him, oh, you better take a haircut, your hair is long. And Rabbi Lowy makes sure to go over to every single person who's an oval by the day of the shloshim and tells them, your hair is too long, you better go take a haircut. Because if no one tells you that, you can't take a haircut. So Rabbi Lowy always makes sure to tell you that. Oh, so we're going to soon see that that's right. So that those who learn a whole year, there's a lot of shilas in the poskim, like the contemporary poskim. There are those who hold that someone who's in the year for his parents should not take a haircut more than every 90 days. There are those who say not more than every 60 days. There are those who say that he should wait at least twice the amount of time that he normally waits to take a haircut. And then there's the shaila is, when does one start counting the 90 days the first time? Does he count it from his last haircut, or does he count it from when he lost his father? What if he took a haircut 2 months ago and then he lost his father? So now he should wait another 3 months? So there's a shayla about that as well. When do you count? When did you start the clock? So there's a lot of shaylas about how that works. Shaving, of course, being that people shave a lot more frequently than they cut their hair, the time frame is, of course, much smaller as far as how often one's allowed to shave. We should know from these things. I'll call a mason kulam. For all mason, it's actually part of death. Listen, I'd rather pay my taxes. Okay, Zaktik more weiter. I'll call a mason kulam. Nichnas leveisa simcha. For all mason, they're allowed to go to a simcha la'achar la'majoyim, because that's when the avail ends. Allah v'alimay t'lach yud beis chodesh. Amar Rabba Babachana, what type of simcha are you allowed to go to? Only a simchas mereyos. The simchas mereyos was not like an official chasna. It was just people getting together to party. And we'll soon see that what used to happen is people used to get together to have a little party together. And what they would do is they would do this on a regular basis. And instead of splitting the expenses of these sudas, they would switch off in hosting the sudas. So once I would host the suda, and then next week somebody else would host the suda, and it would even out because we all host. So therefore, we would all equally take the share of the expense and enjoy as well. Frank the Gemara, but you're saying Dafka to a simchas mereyos, you're allowed to go to beis chodesh, but not to a chasna. Meisvei, it says ula simcha ula mereyos lamajoin. So it says sai for a simcha, sai for mereyos, which means that the simcha is not mereyos. The simcha will be even for a chasna. You're allowed to go after 30 days. So the Gemara kasha, a meimer masnahachi. A meimer learned this way. Amar Rabba Babachana, ula simchas mereyos muter lichanas la'alta. He was even more meimer. He said, till now we were saying a simchas mereyos, which is this casual type of party, is after 30 days, but a simcha chasna, you have to wait even longer. Here, Rabbi Barchan is saying a simchas mereyos you can go to right away after the shiva. Muter lichanas la'alta. In fact, Gemara v'atanya l'simcha shloshim u'lemereyos shloshim. So clearly, you see that you need 30 days, not just la'alter. But l'kasha hab arisusa hab paranusa. It all depends. If you are going to a party that you're not hosting because it's someone else's turn, yes, then you have to wait 30 days. You can't go la'alter. What if it's your turn to host? Then you have to do it even la'alter, because if yedim is cheshbon, you cannot prava avelis. So the paranusa is when you're paying back, when it's your turn to pay, that would be la'alter. Arisusa, when you're just partying and joining somebody else's party, there you have to wait until after shlosh. I'll call a mace kulan kaireya tefach. For every mace, the amount that has to be torn is a tefach. Tefach is about 6 inches of tear. Al aviv alimoy, but al aviv alimoy achi galas liboy, you have to tear so much that you can actually uncover your collarbone. Omer Abavo, my car, where do you see in the pasuk a remes to the fact that the tree needs to be a tefach? It says Vayechsach David b'vegadav vayikarim. David grabbed his baguette and he tore that. Is that talking about Shol? No, I don't think it's talking about Shol. Yeah, it's talking about by a shiva. I don't know which specific shiva it's talking about. There's the b'vegadav vayikarim, and he tore them. Does Rashi say where this was?
It could be his son. It could be his son.
When he learned that Sholem
Rashi said Shol died.
Oh,
Okay. But yes, the lashon achiza is ein pachus mitefach. Whenever you use the lashon of achiza of a grab, for yes, that means there's a list of tefach. A kol makes him kulam. Afilu lavish asar chalukim einay karei ela elyon. Even if there's one is wearing multiple layers, only the outer baguette needs to be torn. Alav alimay karei as kulam. All of the clothing. That's why by the father they cut the jacket and the shirt. Right? They cut the jacket and the shirt. The afik resusai einimakevis. The afik resusai does not have to be torn. What is this afik resusai? So Rashi says shal roisha. There's some type of kafia where they wrapped it around his head and they wrapped it around his body a little bit. That's something that does not have to be torn. Echad ish v'echad isha. Both a man and a woman have to rise priya. Rav Shimon Lozer ha'isha kairas is a tachton. She cuts her lower baguette. But she puts it back in place, and then the chazeres v'karasis elyon, and then she will then she Rashi in the outer beged, but at least the inner beged is still covering her, so she remains tsunua. I'll call him some kulam. Rata mavdul kamei safa shaloi. Rata ain't mavdul. Al avav avimai mavdul. I saw what looks like two pshatim, one in Rashi and one in the Rashi Ksaviyad. So in Rashi, the way I understood it was that you could either cut the neckline and tear it open, or you can not cut the neckline, but cut underneath the neckline and then tear it down. Because if you cut the neckline, Rashi says, it just looks like you have a bigger opening in your neck. So it's not so near that it's torn. But if you put the blade in below the neck opening and you tear, that's clearly a tear. That's obvious to everybody that it's a tear. That's what I understood from how Rashi says it. I'll read Rashi inside, and you'll argue with me if you don't understand it that way. So I also see from Rashi that I read the earlier Gemara wrong. So let me just run back to here. It says Aisha Karasis Atachton Umachsiros Lachara Vichayzeres. Vichayzeres means you put it back in place. I'm sorry. Vichayzeres Karasa Elyon. No, I read it right. Vichayzeres Karasa Elyon means the Chazeres here is going with the Karasa Elyon. I'm sorry, I read that right. So let's look at the next one. Rota Mavla Kamisofa. She'enoi Kareya, the Gimel sticks of She'enoi Kareya Bisofa Shelafnei Atzavar. You don't cut the neck opening. Elakame Sofa Shelafnei Hasofa. You cut around underneath the neckline, is how I understood Rashi. Shelafnei Hasavar She'enoi Kareya. You don't cut the actual neckline, you cut the beged below the neckline. The Kareya Tachtel Kedei She'ei Nira Karah. So you could tell it's torn. It doesn't just look like an extended neckline, like you opened it up a little bit bigger. You just cut open the opening where your head goes through, the neck opening. You'll just think that it's an expanded opening. So that's how Rashi learns. But the Lakuta, the Rashi Ksaviyad says a little bit different. He says here, Rata Mavdil is, let's see where he says it over here. Rata Mavdil Kamei Safa Shaloi Claimer Maskal Kriya Mechalal Besat Safa. Exactly the opposite. You do cut the neckline. The Kareya Klape Mata, and you pull down, you go down. So you basically open up the neckline much bigger. Rata Mavdil Maskal V'Noikev Lamata Besat Safa. You start the hole below the neck opening, connected Kresai, closer to his belly, the Karei you tear. But Vasava shall chaluk, the base, Hatzavar, but the actual opening with the neckline is Eine Karei. So the way I understand it, Rashi Ksaviyad is saying almost the opposite of what Rashi is saying in the real pshat. What does the ArtScroll say? He brings both pshatim or he brings one pshat? Like right over here, where your neckline opens, where your head comes through, right over here. So they usually cut right over here, right in the tear. So we cut from the neckline and then we pull it all the way down. Okay, so let's see the Gemara Vayta. So he says which way? There's both. Okay. Okay, so let's see the Gemara Vayta. Okay. Zok the Gemara Vayta. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, Kol Kriya She'einu Mavdil Kami Safa Shaloi. If it doesn't open it up completely, depending on which track you learn, Eino Ela Karashal Tiflis. It's a nonsense Kriya. It's not a real Kriya. Omer Bavo. Bavo said, my time with Rabbi Yehuda. What's the story of Rabbi Yehuda who says it has to be Mavdil Kami Safa Shaloi? Yichseva Yechsak Bebegodov Vayikarim Lishnayim. He pulled his beged, just talking about Elisha, but Elio, he pulled his beged, he tore it into two. The Yikarim Lishnayim cut into two pieces. If it says he tore it, when you tear something, you're tearing something into two. Ella, it's trying to tell you, when someone writes his kriya, it has to be very visible that it's torn, and therefore it has to be a significant tear. I'll call him you're allowed to baste it together, do a rough stitch to repair the tear. And after shloshim, one could do a proper seam. You're only allowed to do a rough repair. One is never allowed to repair that thing. But a woman is allowed to roughly stitch it back together because she has to remain sneezed. You can do it by hand, you can do it with the kli. With the other you do it with your hand, but avada you're allowed to start with the kli. That's why they start the kli itself. So No, the Korea, or no, the previous shtickle was about fixing. Now we're up there when you cut. So yeah, even though you're allowed to start it off with a knife, they usually use a laser bit to start it, but the oval himself has to tear it. And the loch is for a parent, it's on the left side, and for anybody else on the right side. That's the minute. Either means you could rise kriya in privacy. It has to be in public. There are those who learn that it means it has to be very visible. It should be in public. We only compared all these, like a Rav and a Vezin and a Nasi, to Avi Imai, only Lagabe Ichoi, meaning that you cannot stitch it together. But Lagabe, where you should do the Kriya, if it's maybe Chutz or maybe Fnim, you don't find such a comparison. My lab, Afidul and Nasi. Pashas, even a Nasi doesn't have to be Mibu Chutz. So it's shver on Reb Chis who says V'chein Nasi, but a Nasi is like a parent that has to be Mibu Chutz. Nisi Shchib, a Nasi died. Turn over your grinder. It's like a bucket. And stand up on it so everyone should see you. And show your kriya. Show what you're doing so people should know that you're supposed to do a proper kriya for a nasi. Okay, let's stop over here. We'll be on tomorrow.